McMinnville resident and recent candidate for City Council, George Humlie. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, Todd, thank you for inviting me. This is a new venture for you, and I'm just excited where it's going to go. You're a great guy, and I've known you for years. We live in the same ward, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, speaking of the same ward, I wanted to lead with the fact that you recently, November 8th, and actually it took a little while to find out because the count took so long, but you ran against an incumbent, and it was your first, I believe, go round into government and politics. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, this is the first time I've ever done anything like this.
And so it's kind of tough because Zach Geary has been in the city council for a while, and you took on, it's almost like taking on Goliath in a way, not that he's a bad guy, but just that anybody who's an incumbent, you've already got some stuff stacked against you. But what I believe, I'm just going to guess that the reason, you have reasons, and we'll ask here in a second, that you decided to run, and really you didn't have any choice which ward, is that correct? I mean, because of where you live?
That's correct. McMinnville's broken up into thirds, Ward 1, 2, and 3, and I live in Ward 2, and I had no idea what ward I lived in, and I saw a map of the whole thing, and it turns out to be my garbage route. So I'm very familiar with the ward.
And not everybody who's watching today would know that that's what you do. I mean, and have been doing for, well, how long have you been working? Name the title of what you do.
Well, I started in 1995 working for City Sanitary Service, and then it transferred to Western Oregon Waste. Wow. And now Recology owns it. They're based out of San Francisco. So I'm a residential garbage man. I've been doing it for, 27 plus years now. And
we love the fact that you do it. And every Monday morning, there you are. Thank you.
Bright and early.
Because I'm in your ward too. So
that's right.
Thank you for your service.
You betcha.
So what made you, when first of all, did you start to feel like you should run for office locally, and then why?
Well, without any serious considerations, I began to think this way about 10 years ago. And then with the election of 2020, I really put it on the front burner and started to think that, it's really important that I do this, because I see local government as like the rudder of a ship. And honestly, I think that local government can determine the very culture of the federal government. And I recognize that. It's an important thing. And so that really just pushed me into this area. I considered with a lot of prayer and talked with my wife, and she says, I think that we need to do this. And I say we because she was my campaign manager and absolutely canvassed the whole ward. And I'm just really proud of her.
Well, awesome. So that's a deep concept. We don't have to go into it a lot today, but maybe in the future, about the nuts and bolts of how a local government does steer the federal in some way. There are repercussions. Maybe it's the same as how we conduct ourselves in our own family, husband, wife, kids. That's like a mini government, and that has its own. Do you want to touch on that now, or do you want to get into that at some?
No, I think that's a good thing. I mean, honestly, the family is the actual cornerstone of our culture. It absolutely is. And I think in a lot of ways, that's why it's under attack, because there are some nefarious people out there that want to absolutely take this country in a whole different direction. And where do they start? With the family. And so the family really is connected to local government. And that's one of the reasons I've just moved in this direction. It's very important to me. Family is, and our culture, very, very important.
So what are some of the critical issues or concerns you see in McMinnville or Yamhill County?
Well, I've written some thoughts down that I'm going to kind of build off of. The increase in crime has happened here. And I think that that's one of the indicators as to why local government is so important. When we see district attorneys that have gone rogue, what happens? Crime increases. And we're seeing that nationwide. And that is tied to the local governments. The lack of trust in our elections is due to either negligence or possibly even corruption in our local elections. and that's something that has to be dealt with.
Mm.
I think, I don't know if you're familiar with Jordan Peterson, but I got his book, and he's got a quote. He says, "It's important that you clean up your own room first." And I
Mm.
realize that has to do with the personal level. Before we can actually help anybody else or clean up our local government, we got to clean up our own life. Clean your room
Mm.
first. But bringing that to the local government level, we need to clean our local government, clean up our room first, and then we can make a difference federally.
Well, in your campaign, you mentioned transparency, and maybe that's one of those areas that you think needs to be cleaned up because it's not necessarily transparent what all is going on in our local government. I mean, I will say that I believe every city council meeting is recorded and you can go watch what people
Mm-hmm.
have talked about. But that being said, if you don't go find that video and watch all 3 hours, then you may not know. And then there's the local newspaper that could give us a little bit of it. It's usually, they give pretty good detail of what's going
They
on. It
do.
may not cover everything,
Right.
but they're not going to cover every topic
Right.
every time. So,
Well, exactly. What I've learned is this, and this is what I've when people found out that I was considering this, immediately they start coming to talk to me. Well, make sure that you fix this and fix this. And I
hmm,
didn't. What the biggest thing that I heard, the complaint that I heard, is that the people don't know what's going on. Now, maybe some of that is they don't get involved, but a lot of it is because our money is being spent in ways that we're not told about. And that's what I mean by a lack of transparency. I think that we need to let the people know what their money is going for.
well, and you brought to my attention something that I didn't know about before we got on the show today. A few days ago, you mentioned a fee, and who knows? There's probably dozens of other fees. I don't know. I'll be asking other city council people about it, but that apparently is going to be on our water bill starting in
Yep.
January, and it's to pay down some problems, but we didn't vote on that.
Right. It's called the city service fee, and honestly, it's a tax. There's no doubt about it, and it's actually brought in through the Mac Water and Light bill. And Mac Water and Light basically said, "This is not us. We are not charging you," but they're using their system, and it goes to the city. And honestly, I couldn't think of a better example of taxation without representation is what this
Hmm.
is, because it lays out several things that there's some shortfalls that we have in the city that this needs to take care of. And I understand shortfalls. Let's say they got in trouble and we need to make that up. Well, that would be fine. Put the tax in for a short period of time and then put a sunset on it. But this is going to be
Hmm.
an ongoing tax to pay for. We're not told everything. There are some things that we're told, and if you ask, you can see those things. But I just think that we need an accounting for everything that is being spent. I mean, look at all the services that are being provided. Are they
Hmm.
services that are necessities? That's my biggest concern. I was never told. I think that's important.
Yeah, and how would you know? I mean, unless you go in and ask for the budget and go through line by line, and then that's the easy part. Asking what is essential, what's not essential, what has always been here, and we're always going to have it because we've always had it, but doesn't necessarily need to continue. It's this whole thing of ballooning government, and we always need to grow it versus maybe being more efficient, and that can go because you mentioned for an example the crime issue. Well, there's lots of things that roll through my mind when I hear about crime, and just recently we had the high school was shot at.
Yep.
Okay, and I heard that it woke me up. And there's gunplay. There's been an increase in that
Yep.
in town. There's a lot of different ways to address that. It could be more police. It could be finding the population areas where that's happening the most, and maybe doing some work with the people in their homes. I mean, and those are budgetary items, but not necessarily all has to happen through the city
Exactly.
or the county. It could come through churches. It could come through
Exactly.
just people uniting. So
We've forgotten how to use a voluntary system. I mean, volunteers, people, if they knew that they were actually making a difference in their community,
Mm,
I just think that the hearts of the people, they would step up to the plate and volunteer these services. And I see myself as a person that can motivate people to. I've done it now. We've been here since 1989. Been involved in many committees and many programs where we've gone and helped people, and it's all on a volunteer basis. And I
mm.
think that that is something that the city really needs to lean on, are volunteers, bringing the people
Wow.
in to serve.
Well, what comes to my spirit right now as you're saying that is maybe if you're led to pick one topic that you would want to help that happen with and talk to the city council. You didn't make the election this time. You might run again next time and get to bring it up right there in the meeting. But in the meantime, as a volunteer, wouldn't it be interesting to at least see what they think, find out what they think is a priority, and then bring folks in?
Well, I
Would you
certainly
think
think
about
so.
that?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, one of the questions that you'd laid out for me to consider that we might talk about today is some of the concerns that I might have. And one of them, without hesitation, is the homeless situation. I mean, it
Mm,
is a big problem without question. And um, there's no quick, easy fix.
that's
I'm
for sure.
not naive, realizing that we can just do this and this and it's going to be fixed. It's going to take a long time to fix it, but we've got to do the right things. We need to approach it simultaneously from different angles. And what I see us doing is we're approaching it from taking care of their needs from one angle, and that does not solve the problem. It's
Right.
multifaceted, and so we need to do that. There's a new $1.5 million navigation center that it's called. It's been passed, and they're actually looking for a contractor to build this here in McMinnville, and it's going to actually provide showers and meals and shelter for the folks, and it's going to be a very helpful thing. Problem that I have is that it's what's called a low barrier facility, and a low barrier means that the people that come in to get the services don't have to be clean and sober, unlike the Union Gospel Mission. You want to go there and get their services, you can't come in drunk. Well, this apparently low barrier means that that's okay. And I think that this is going to only exacerbate the problem. It's just going to bring people in as a magnet. And it's because we're not addressing uh, bigger problems that these folks are dealing with. I understand the folks that are down and out of luck and that things have fallen apart and they need help. I get that. I've been there to help them throughout the years. But when you're dealing with the problem of drugs and alcohol and addictions, this is the problem. And we need to, in this center, um, this navigation center, I think that it would be a good idea to provide detox services to the facility as well.
Mm,
And I don't, it's like that's a no-brainer to me. You need to do this. It's going to take a lot of work. It would even take a lot of volunteers to provide the service. I get that, but I think people would be willing to step up to the plate. I actually did some. There's good news in that there is such services. One in particular is called MAT, M-A-T, which is medication assisted treatment, and MAT is the use of medications in combination with counseling and behavioral therapies to provide a whole patient approach to the treatment of substance use disorders. That's a program that could be implemented in this navigation center. And I really want to get behind whoever is in charge of this to let them know we need to go in this route.
well, and there will be a track record at some point for Matt. There probably is already somewhere where it's been
Well, there
used.
is. In fact, I've got
And
a website. It's samhsa.gov. I encourage people to go and take a look at it. Again, samhsa.gov. And you can see the
I'm
track
going to
record.
throw another one out there. Teen Challenge has like a 90% success
Absolutely.
rate. They're not everywhere, but the people that attend, and it's kind of a long-term commitment, but
Absolutely.
Jesus comes in and changes their life instead. So there's that component of power that's beyond oneself
Absolutely.
too. So
Yeah, for sure. And again, my heart goes out to the churches in town that are
hmm
week after week providing services and meals for the
mm,
folks. That's, and my hat's off to them. That's so good. But the problem is they're getting tired. And that's one of the reasons why we've got this navigation center that's opened up to alleviate the pressure from the churches. But it's not time for them to step back now. We need to volunteer and come into the program and help actually solve some of these issues. And I really think a detox center is really important. That's where I would start.
For sure. Well, that's a huge topic, and I think, it may not be right now, but potentially this week that we are actually talking. I don't know when this show will actually air. There's a city council meeting or a subcommittee about houselessness, homelessness. And I think it's been ongoing. It's been an issue. It's been in the paper. Everybody, you see it, you feel it, and your heart goes out. But we can address that sometime in the future. We mentioned a little bit about Jesus. And you're a Christian. Is God okay with Christians being in government?
Well, it was an interesting question that that we had talked about, and some people would say no. I just don't think they understand. Well, the first passage that came to my mind was Matthew 5:13. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. And I think over the several decades, what's happened is because of how we use salt as simply flavoring for our food, it just makes things taste better. That wasn't the situation back then. What Jesus is talking about with salt was a preservative. And because there was no refrigeration, so we get our word salary. When soldiers were paid, they were paid in salt because they had to preserve their food. So I see the Christians in government are the salt of the earth. We are trying to preserve the things that are good, and I really think that the country that we live in with this form of government is a reason why we need to do it, and so I would encourage Christians, as God leads you, to step up to the plate and get into these local areas that you can make a difference.
Well, speaking of salt, and then when Jesus was talking, he talked about you're the light of the world. So salt and light is a common phrase for Christians. Being salty and being light and love. Let's say you down the road get elected to something locally, and how would you relate to and collaborate with somebody whose views and maybe their efforts in government are directly opposed to what you believe, and you might even think are harmful for the citizenry as a Christian?
As a Christian, and obviously there are a lot of disagreements that I would have at a number of levels, and I don't want to go into them right now. But there definitely is a conflict of interest in that situation. But I'm reminded of a couple of passages that in Romans 12:18, if it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Well, much depends on me. I can live peaceably with all men, and I try my best to do that. And I think I've done a good job. I've got a good track record, a reputation of being a very peaceable man. But I'm also reminded, and why I don't fear having any disagreements with certain people, because it says in 1 Corinthians 5:12, "For what have I to do with judging those who are outside of the faith? It's not my job to judge them." And so that takes a lot of pressure off of me. Whose job is it? But those who are outside, God judges. That is his prerogative to judge those when he sees fit. My job is to work peaceably with all men. And so I can work side by side with people even though I disagree with. And I actually look forward to that, because what I want to do is demonstrate my life of faith and have it spill over to other people in the way that I treat them and the way I interact with people.
Awesome. Changing the subject a little bit. You play music. People probably are familiar with your music playing. I think that's how I first ran into you. You were very helpful with a project and volunteered lots of time and equipment, and thank you again. But how would you describe your style? How frequently do you play around the county, and how can people keep up with your next gig?
Well, I'm a worship leader at church, number one. So, I mean, that you find me there every Sunday.
So go to your church. Do you want to tell us where you go, or do you?
Yeah,
want to
no, it's the City of Hope is what it's called, and so I'm there. But I also play throughout the county at different wineries and Third Street events and festivals and things like that. And I'm with a group of guys called Second Time Refined. And people can, the type of music we do is the stuff I grew up with, 70s and 80s and some 90s music, from Steve Miller to Chicago, Doobie Brothers, and just real danceable music, Earth, Wind, and Fire. And it's just a lot of fun. And the way they can find us is oftentimes we post on Facebook. So in fact, whenever we're going to do a gig, we do it via Facebook. So.
And what's the Facebook page? Is it George Humlie?
Well, the one actually that she posts a lot more than I do is my wife, Anita. She's not only campaign manager, but she's the music manager. She just gets things out, the word out. And anyway, but we also have a Facebook Second Time Refined where we make announcements.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, I'm excited to someday get to one of your gigs. Now that I hear what you're playing, I didn't know. She did mention it to me when she knocked on the door that day and gave me a flyer about you, but I didn't make it to your gig. And maybe I'll just put some of the dates on the bottom of the screen during the show. That'll be helpful.
Well, that sounds great.
Well, George, I appreciate your time. If there's anything else you'd like to say before we close?
Well, I just want to say thank you to all of the support that I got from Ward 2 and all of the kind words. And I'm grateful that this was not a mudslinging event. I would have been warned that this thing can get down and dirty, and why would you even want to do this? It wasn't that way at all. And so I just appreciate the heart of Zach Geary, great guy. He's got a cool beard too. He did shave it. It's like, Zach, that was such a cool beard. Grow it back.
Like no other.
No other. And we're very good friends. We have some disagreements, but that's okay. I plan to live peaceably with all men. And so we'll see what happens in the next couple of years. I'll make some announcements, but I'm right now I've got my hand to the plow, and I'm pushing forward and learning everything that I possibly can, and trying to encourage people to step up to the plate.
For sure. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next with really all of us. Again, George, thank you so much for your time, and God bless you in whatever you're next to do.
Thanks, God. I appreciate it.
Do you know of a story that needs to be reported, a person who needs to be heard? Let me know and write to me at truthseekeroregon@gmail.com.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of these United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And to my country I make my pledge to always love, protect, and defend her. And we the people across this land, one